On this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, I'll be covering the little-known Parade-era vault track, Heaven. Heaven was recorded in late May 1985 at Sunset Sound Studios, and according to Prince Vault, it was considered for the short-lived musical idea that was called The Dawn. There are a handful of unreleased songs recorded during this time period that were considered for Parade or The Dawn or Roadhouse Garden. Obviously, only one of those came to fruition, and that's, of course, the Parade album. The Dawn and Roadhouse Garden were just concepts and just ideas, but never fully fleshed out, never materialized as completed projects. So songs that maybe were intended specifically for those projects often found themselves stuck in the vault for, well, at this point in 2025, indefinitely, as Heaven is and remains an unreleased track. And because it's a fairly unknown song in terms of vault tracks, I guess it's probably been circulating for a while, but I didn't become aware of it until maybe, half a dozen years ago. Kind of about the time when things started to really start being passed around a little bit more freely, I suppose, after Prince's passing. And there hasn't been a lot documented about this track, and it doesn't appear as if Prince ever worked on it again after May of 1985, so I'm not sure if Prince just thought that it was a bit too undercooked, and some of the concepts and ideas that he would present in this song, from lyrically and thematically, would be, better served later on songs like The Cross or I Wish You Heaven. It has a bit of a similar vibe to a song that he just released from Around the World in a Day called The Ladder. So, the idea of heaven and being a place that we should strive for and attempt to achieve through our actions here on earth was one that is an idea that Prince certainly mined, for a while there in the 80s and beyond in his career. It's a fairly long song. It's over 7.5 minutes long, but there aren't a lot of lyrics to accompany the song's length. And to me, the song, sounds a bit more like 83, 84 era Prince, if I'm being honest, not 85. The sound of the songs that he was creating for Parade felt fuller, more grandiose, I guess. And Heaven has a more stripped down drum machine, synthesizer sound to it, like really what he was doing in the early 80s, not mid 80s. And the last 3.5 minutes of the song is all just instrumental. So really padding out the length is just the instrumentation towards the end of the song, or at least like almost the last half of it. And but it's an interesting song. It's got a kind of an earworm hook to it, keyboard hook. So musically, I dig it. But this is a lyrics podcast, so we're going to dive into the song's lyrics. Heaven will be here on earth if we just try to love. Heaven. We will find heaven all in time. That's how kind of the song starts. And Prince is really trying to convince humanity that we don't need to wait for death or for the afterlife to experience heaven if we just make our time here on earth more heavenly. So just try to love each other. We'll find heaven. And we have to be patient, all in time. Heaven will be here on earth. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of when I hear that, or, when I see the lyrics and hear the line, heaven will be here on earth. Of course, I can't not think of the Belinda Carlisle Heaven is a Place on Earth, which was a big hit in 1986. So it's not like Prince was copying Belinda's major hit to create this song, because this was recorded in May of 85, so Heaven is a Place on Earth was a big hit a year later. But the similarities are just too obvious to ignore. All the people we abandon means another loss. Soon the hearts of every gentleman would bear the cross. So society's problems, I think, he's touching on a bit here. People that we abandon with that line. The sick, the downtrodden, homeless, mentally ill. All people that we could be lifting up today on earth instead of just doing things, ignoring them, or, he says abandoned. So it's another loss. It's another societal loss. The people that we ignore oftentimes, provide value to our lives, not just for the things that we can do for them, but the things that they can do for us in return, fulfilling each other. And instead of ignoring and abandoning the people in our lives that we, have a tendency to do. And it doesn't even have to be a comment on some of the more forgotten aspects of our society. It can just be anyone that we abandon, whether it's a loved one, a lover, a child, a spouse, someone that we, a friend in need, people that we abandon. And Prince is talking here about it's a loss on us physically, like we lose that person in our life, but we also, if they're important enough to be someone in our lives that own a piece of our heart and soul, and then we abandon them, then that piece is missing forever. And so it's a loss for us emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And here he mentions, we would bear the cross. Soon the hearts of every gentleman would bear the cross. And of course, I can't hear this line without thinking of the cross from Sign of the Times, and how, we need to take on hardships and sacrifices so we can join Jesus and God and our other loved ones in heaven, which is what the song is about. Don't be selfish today. Bear the cross, do what you need to do, put in the work, whatever that means for you. We can dream of color if we look into the sun, unafraid of blindness, only blind faith in the one. There's only one heaven, we will find heaven, all in time. And he repeats heaven. I kind of like what he's doing in this verse, where it seems like lines kind of bleed into each other. We can dream of color if we look into the sun, and then look into the sun leads into unafraid of blindness. So, obviously if you stare directly at the sun, you can go blind. And so he makes that connection here with the next line, unafraid of blindness, and then mentions only blind faith in the one. So blind faith referring to just kind of an unwavering faith in God. There's only one heaven, so blind faith in the one, which is God. There's only one heaven. We will find heaven, all in time. So the connections being made here from line to line is interesting to me, just from a structure standpoint, and how he chose to write these lyrics. Dreaming in color, again, this is kind of a comment I made in a previous episode about so much color being, I think it was maybe in All My Dreams. It seems like such a bright and colorful song. This song talks about dreaming in color if we look into the sun, but then the aesthetic of the era that he was creating songs for, the Parade Under the Cherry Moon era, was all black and white. So it's interesting how there's a bit of a disconnect there between lyrics that he's talking about that are full of color and full of vibrance, and the aesthetic that he would soon be applying to his music for the next year or so. But Around the World in a Day had just come out a month prior to the recording of this song, and that's a very colorful album. aesthetically. The Raspberry Beret video was full of color. The album covers got the colorful drawings. Paisley Park is a reference to all the different colors and creeds and races that are joined together at this, this utopian park that he's referring to, Paisley Park. So I think maybe the black and white aesthetic was to come. I don't know if he had that quite in mind yet in May of 1985. He might still be on a little bit of a, to use an overused phrase, hippie vibe in spring of 85. Although I definitely don't think that that's what he preferred to refer to this era of his music, being very inspired by the hippie culture of the late 60s, early 70s. But I personally can't help but think of it. I think of like the clothing that a lot of the hippies wore. I specifically think very clearly about the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and their album covers were very vibrant and colorful, and especially Are You Experienced and Axis Bold as Love. It's giving me a lot of that. Sly and the Family Stone, the Beatles, they all had that very similar aesthetic around this time, late 60s, early 70s. So it's a connection I make, and it may be lazy for me to say it, but I've always felt that way, even back in the 80s when I was listening to things like Purple Rain and Around the World in a Day, at the same time I was discovering my mom's old albums, like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced. All of that stuff I was becoming aware of it all simultaneously, even though they were from two different eras of music. I was learning about it and listening to it at the same time. So to me, they're all kind of combined. But I've gone on a bit of a tangent from this song, Heaven. I mentioned the dreaming of color, looking into the sun, unafraid of blindness, blind faith in the one. There's only one heaven. And those lines, I think, just speak more to the theme of the song, being a very spiritual, faith-driven song, finding heaven. I don't think heaven is referred to in this song as anything but the overt and more commonly, the more commonly known definition of the word heaven, not just something that is beautiful or uplifting. I think he literally means the place where one goes, if you're religious and believe in God, to experience life after death in a way that is beautiful, positive, peaceful, tranquil, and perfect. That's the idea of heaven. Anybody want to go to heaven? He says. Yeah, Lord. Although some of these lyrics, I think, I'm thankful for Moonbeam Levels for You website, because a song this deep in the vault, because it is available and you can listen to it if you can find it on YouTube, or you have an MP3 of it. Otherwise, and I trust this lyric website more so than any other, and that's why I use it. But some of these, the mix is a little poor for this song. It's not very well. The mix is very poor, at least in the version that's been shared over time for this song. It's a bit muddied, muffled. So some of these lyrics, I'm taking on good faith, no pun intended, that the lyrics on Moonbeam Levels for You are accurate, because it's not always obvious to me. There isn't a lot written about this song in the Parade and Sign of the Times Studio Sessions book, but I will read what is here about heaven. Possibly as a follow-up about redemption, Prince recorded Heaven, which contains the lyrics, all the people that we are bad to means another loss. And that's, a little different line than what is on Moonbeam Levels for You, but it's very similar in theme. Soon our hearts are heavy till no man can bear the cross. Again, another slight differentiation between what Moonbeam Levels for You has and the book. So that's interesting. Prince was quietly autobiographical on Heaven, referencing his own deep pain, his distinct view of the world, and his philosophy about how we treat others. Prince would eventually revisit elements of this the following summer when he recorded The Cross. So again, this just goes back to the fact that the mix of this leaked track is a bit too muddy to be 100% certain what he says there. So on Moonbeam Levels for You, all the people we abandon means another loss. According to the book, all the people we are bad to means another loss. I think those two things mean the same thing, regardless of what you hear. Whether you abandon them or you're bad to them, it means another loss. And then the line, soon the hearts of every gentleman would bear the cross, is what's in the website. And in the book, soon our hearts are heavy till no man could bear the cross. Those actually mean a little bit different things to me. Our hearts are heavy, and this comes after talking about losing someone that you abandon or are bad to. Hearts are heavy, so sad, and till no man could bear the cross. So I guess if your hearts are too heavy to bear the cross, to really put in the work and do what you need to do to, sacrifice, you're just not feeling up to it, I suppose. But either way, bearing the cross is really the central theme there. And whether or not you can do it and you feel strong enough to do it, or your hearts are too heavy and too sad and the cross is weighing you down, the weight of the cross is just too much for you in this time of kind of need or despair. I think I like that a bit better in terms of what it is trying to say in this song, at least in that verse of this song, because then the song continues on, and the attempt of the lyrics later in the song is to uplift again and provide more, more inspiration to be good and to do good things. So it's like one verse is talking about this is what we should do because we're still here on earth and we should love one another to find heaven on earth. The second verse talks a bit more about the struggles that we all have internally and as a society, and how that may prevent us from bearing the cross and being the people who are destined for heaven. And then the rest of the song, tells us and reminds us that there's only one heaven. We have to have faith. We have to be unafraid. So I like the way it's structured in that. Positive, negative, uplifting, in that order. And kind of the last section of lyrics that we get for the song before it goes into the extended instrumental outro, there's a kind of a call and response, but they're all repeated by Prince. He doesn't really have anybody else that he's enlisted to help him with background vocals. When I go, and then in background, when you go, will I know, you'll know. When I go, when you go, you gotta free this soul. You gotta free your soul. When you go, I don't know. So a lot of those lines are repeated, so I didn't repeat them exactly how they are in the song, but just taking them out individually and just saying them, it is a very, it provides the feeling that you're maybe in a church, maybe attending a church service, somebody's testifying when I go, will I know? When I go, I gotta free this soul, is really what it's saying. So, when I go, meaning, of course, when I die. And will I know? Will I know if I'm going to heaven when I die? That's a great question. I think anyone who is deeply spiritual or religious wants to know if they're on the right path, if they're on the right path to salvation, wants to know if they're headed for the heavenly gates when they pass. Will they be with their loved ones? Will they be rewarded for their life spent on earth? It's a question that I think a lot of us have asked. Are we living a life that will lead us to heaven when we go? And when my soul is freed, where will it end up? And the idea of the song being just a testament to how we spend our time on earth again, I think is a key aspect of the song. We need to treat each other well. We need to love each other on earth, but we need to have faith. And we need to bear the cross. We need to do the work. Leading up to the moment where we take our last breath and having that sense of peace, knowing that we'll be going to heaven. There's questions. When I go, I'm not sure. Will I know? When you go, I don't know, he says. When you go, I don't know. I can't speak for you. I can't speak for what you've done. I only see what I see. I don't know what kind of life you've lived. I mean, do we really know each other well enough to be able to say you're going to heaven or you're not? The outwardly facing life may be very different from the private life. But in a nutshell, that's heaven. I don't want to go too deep into this because it's really, a song like this, there's been plenty of other, I think, better and more fleshed out songs about religion and Prince's stance on faith, and I would just recommend listening to episodes that they've done on the cross, I Wish You Heaven, The Ladder. Those are 3 good examples of deeply religious and deeply spiritual songs that Prince has written and recorded in the 80s that have a bit more meat to them, that tell a more deeper and more impactful story than Heaven. Maybe that's why he never released it. Maybe it sounded even to himself a bit too dated. And if it required a complete overhaul musically, did he think the lyrics were, so profound that they were worth the song redo? Probably not. And that's why it remains unreleased to this day, in my opinion at least. So what do you think about Heaven? Have you heard this song before? Is it one that you enjoy, or is it just kind of an interesting novelty song from the mid-'80s? It has that very mid-'80s Prince sound, early to mid-'80s Prince sound. It doesn't sound like anything that would be on Parade, for sure. It doesn't really even sound like anything that would be on Around the World in a Day, if you ask me. That's why it's a bit of an anomaly for this time period for him to make a song like that sounds like this. Very interesting indeed. But anyway, that is the episode for Heaven. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at pressrewind.net and on social media, wherever you may reside on social media. I don't do a lot on social media these days, but my show should be on a handful of different social media platforms. If you care to to follow and be notified of new episodes. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.